of Iranian ports, and the two nations have not set a date for further negotiations just yet. Joining me now to discuss is Michael Rubin, Senior Fellow at the American Enterprise Institute and former Pentagon official. All right, Michael, thanks for being with us here on Live Now from Fox.
Hey, thank you for having me, Alexandra.
So let's start here. The IRGC seizing two ships today in the Strait. What is the signal?
Well, the signal is that the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps still can play a spoiler role. Another signal is that if there's going to be negotiations, the Iranians are going to try to extort concessions. But before there's so much self-flagellating that the Iranians are seizing ships because of the U.S. action, let's remember, the Iranians used to seize ships before February 28th. Their assaults on freedom of navigation are quite frequent. And therefore, I don't think any outside analyst should play into the Iranian propaganda on this.
Well, the ceasefire was extended yesterday indefinitely. President Trump says until Iran comes back with a, quote, unified proposal. The question now, who in Iran has the power to make this unified proposal? You wrote extensively about what is left of the regime in your latest published article.
Well, there's several different factions that we need to look at. What is clear is that the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps appears on top. The Iranian president is rumored to be under house arrest. The supreme leader, Mujtaba Khamenei, hasn't been seen since the war began, and there's rumors that he may not even be alive, or if he is, he's in a coma. Then you have the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. On one hand, you have Mohammad Bakr Kalibaf, the Speaker of the Parliament, who is a former veteran of the Revolutionary Guard. He's a four-time presidential candidate. But then you have competitors. You have Ali Fadavi, who's a former defense minister. He's most famous in the West for planning the 1994 Buenos Aires attack on the Jewish community center in Argentina. And then you have Zulqadir, who is the new Secretary of the National Security Council. What Donald Trump is doing, and quite wisely, is saying, we're not going to allow you to play good cop, bad cop with us. If you're going to be serious with having a proposal, you need to all sign on to it so that we don't get into this dynamic, which the Iranians are famous at, in which diplomats make a concession with one group, and then another group says, not so fast, you need to add more concessions.
All right. In your words here, you say, quote, regime change requires fracturing the guard. In your eyes, what does it take to dismantle the IRGC?
Well, the important thing to understand, Alexandra, is for decades we've talked about Iranian politics about being a dichotomy between hardliners and reformists. But in reality, they're not the only political faction. You have the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, and it's not homogenous. You have some people that join the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps for the privileges, because most Iranians at age 18, at least Iranian men, need to join the military because Iran is a conscription society. If they join the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, they tell me when I've been to Iran, when I've been in the region, they get extra bonuses, they get greater gasoline rations. It's a better deal for them, but they may not be true believers. Now, when the bombing starts, you actually have a situation that those who joined only for the privileges, they don't want to lay down their life for this. But then you have others who are ideologically inclined to the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. You can join the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps bubble when you're 8 years old because they run the equivalent of evil Boy Scout programs. And then you can go into the Revolutionary Guard, the Basij, this paramilitary run by the Revolutionary Guard, as they do student councils. And you can go to a university run by the Revolutionary Guard. And so people who have gone this path can really be true believers. Now, when people say, hey, Donald Trump's war has only radicalized the regime, on one hand, that's right. But on the other hand, that's not necessarily a bad sign, because if you have all the Revolutionary Guardsmen who aren't true believers fading away into the woodwork, then those you have left are the ones that you need to target. And one more thing, Alexandra, I've spent a lot of time in southern Lebanon with regard to in Hezbollah territory, and I've talked to both Hezbollah members and former Hezbollah members. And one thing that they said a few years ago in Nabatea, which is really in the heart of southern Lebanon, Hezbollah country, is when Hezbollah changed its payments under sanctions from paying salaries in dollars to paying salaries in Lebanese pounds. About 80% of the Hezbollah guys just went home because Lebanese pounds are worthless. That's the type of fracturing, winnowing down that we need to do.
Well, let's talk money. Is that U.S. blockade of Iranian ships and ports effectively choking off their economic abilities? Is this part of the strategy as well?
You betcha, Alexandra. The blockade, the timing works in our favor. Now, when you look at a map of the Middle East, most Middle Eastern countries, societies going back hundreds, thousands of years, built their cities on rivers and coastlines. Iran is an exception, where most of the cities are in the interior of the country. And the largest Iranian port, Bandar Abbas, is actually only the 15th largest Iranian city. When you actually look at a map of the Persian Gulf, you only really have about 10 ports on the Persian Gulf that we need to blockade. Now, here's the thing. Iran exports oil. We all know that. And they need to export oil for their salaries. What a lot of people don't know is they have so mismanaged their refineries over the last 40 years that they have to import a lot of their gasoline, maybe between 20 and 40% of it. Now, gasoline isn't just used for running automobiles and so forth. Because the average age of Iranian oil fields is about 90 years, what they do is they inject that refined gasoline into the Iranian oil fields to raise the pressure and extract oil. So you get this cycle that if they can't get their gasoline, they can't extract oil to sell. And so Iran is in a situation where they may only have about a week left before they have to shut down their oil fields. And once you do that, that does permanent damage to them. They understand that the clock is ticking for them, not for the United States.
Well, let's continue our conversation here about that ceasefire extension. The Associated Press reporting today that Iran has acknowledged the extension, but they won't commit yet to a second round of diplomatic talks. Why is there a stall here?
You know, this is just all positioning and strategy. A few years ago, I wrote a book called Dancing with the Devil, which was a history of American diplomacy with rogue regimes, including Iran. And one of the things I was looking at in this book wasn't what the United States was doing, but what our adversaries' strategies were. And the Iranians often talk openly about this. What they will try to do is the same thing the North Koreans tried to do. Our initial goal was to end the nuclear program, to end the terrorism, to end the ballistic missiles, and to make sure that the Iranian people weren't massacred again. But as the Iranians tried to sort of negotiate every point, as they tried to run down the clock, what we're actually seeing is the Iranians trying to change our perception of diplomacy from successful diplomacy being ending the nuclear program to successful diplomacy being let's just have another round of talks. And so what Donald Trump needs to do, what the entire American apparatus needs to do, is see the forest through the trees and not somehow backslide into this dynamic that we had in our negotiations with North Korea back during the Clinton administration. We're just getting the other side to the table is the goal enough. So the Iranians are trying to extract concessions. Donald Trump isn't your normal president. He's not your normal diplomat. And so I think the Iranians are miscalculating if they think they can run down the clock on this.
That point there about perception is really interesting. I do want to talk a little bit more about the inner workings of Iran. To you, what is indicative of how Iran is divided on how to respond?
Well, what I would look at as an analyst is this. We haven't seen the supreme leader, but we have seen statements in the supreme leader's name. And of course, in the Iranian system, the supreme leader isn't just the ultimate political authority. He's not just the ultimate religious authority. Technically speaking, if we want to look at the theology of this, he's the deputy of the Messiah on earth. Pretty cool to have on your business card. You can't get a higher position than that. But you got a situation where if we want to know who's in charge, we've got to start asking who is writing these statements. Now, what's actually interesting is one of the politicians, Saeed Jalali, who is in one of the hardline factions, has started asking questions on Twitter, at least until his Twitter account was shut down, in which he was saying, we need to know who's actually issuing these statements. And so you have this competition between the Revolutionary Guard factions, which we talked about before, Alexandra, in which some may be issuing statements trying to absorb the legitimacy of this religious figure, when in reality that religious figure might be dead. So the question for Donald Trump and the Americans are we negotiating with a ghost? And that's something which the Americans and the Pakistanis who are brokering these talks need to figure out quickly, because you don't want to make a concession to someone who's already dead.
Great segue into my next question. Can Pakistan convince Iran to come to the table?
Okay, I have a problem with Pakistani mediation. It's just been about 15 years ago that America's SEAL Team 6 was killed Osama bin Laden, the head of Al Qaeda, in Abbottabad, Pakistan. And Abbottabad, as you know, is the equivalent of West Point. There's no way he was just hiding there, sight unseen. People knew he was there. Now, you got a situation where Pakistan not only was responsible for the deaths of hundreds of Americans in Afghanistan, but you know that 90% of the fertilizer, which was a precursor to many of the improvised explosive devices that were used against our forces in Afghanistan, came from two factories inside Pakistan. And so Pakistan could have closed this down if they wanted to. And when the Americans withdrew from Afghanistan, Pakistan celebrated. My rule of thumb is you never want to choose a mediator who wants to see you lose. And when we look at the rhetoric in the street in Pakistan, they want to see us lose. Look, I've also been in Pakistan several times, and I got to say, I've never been in a more anti-American country. And that includes my time living in the Islamic Republic of Iran. So the question for the Pakistanis is, why are they mediating? Are they mediating because they want somehow to snatch defeat for us from the jaws of victory? Are they mediating because they want to curry favor with Donald Trump, so the next time they sponsor terrorists that are attacking India, there's no sort of reaction? I think we have some really hard questions to ask, not only about Pakistan, but for that matter, when Qatar mediates or when Turkey mediates.
Of course, the situation in the Middle East, very dynamic. Anything that you're watching for in the next 24 to 48 hours that you think could change the stakes?
You know, I think Iran is going to leverage up its defiance because it knows the clock is running out. And then in the long term, I want to see plans for how we're going to secure the weapons depots in each of Iran's 31 or 32 provinces, because you got one Revolutionary Guard unit in each of those provinces, and you don't want those weapons going loose across the region.
All right. Michael Rubin, a senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute, former Pentagon official. Michael, thank you so much for your insight, your analysis here on Live Now from Fox.